talk to the girl, you say hi, give her a compliment, she says hi back, you introduce yourselves, and then you're like, okay, now what? But if you know that you can be like, you know what, there's something about you that I love and something about you I'm not so sure about. If you have that in your back pocket, maybe it's not the greatest line in the world, it's okay. Now you know it's not going to be that weird, awkward silence, and you know you have some method to progress the interaction. So one good solution for a lot of your excuses, oftentimes, is being prepared. Let's take your two questions, right? So you're talking about making excuses, holding yourself back, those kind of things, and you're talking about not knowing what to do. And those two things are very related. So a lot of your excuses are based on the unknown. Usually when you're scared about talking to a girl, you're nervous, you're tense, you're hesitating, you do the thing where you walk over to her, you kind of stand in her inner area, walk away again, stand over there again, get close, think about it. When you're doing all that, whatever that scenario in your head is that's terrifying you that much is always, and I almost never say always, you guys know this about me, I don't say always very much, but that is basically always worse than whatever the worst reaction she's going to give you is. Most of the times after you go get the reaction, you actually feel relief, right? And you feel better about yourself. It's a positive experience. So a lot of the excuses are based on the unknown, and if you just go deal with it one time, you won't have that excuse so much. However, it is a little bit valid that if you don't know what you're going to do, it is easier to have excuses. It's easier to have that hang up, right? And so little game history, right? So nowadays, there's a much more like kind of what's taught in game is a much more sort of natural style of game, which is like, you're coming up with, you're expressing your own personality in your best way, all that kind of stuff. But when I first learned game, when I first learned formal game in year 2002, the way that people were doing game was literally trying to script the entire interaction for like 4 hours or 7 hours, right? We're trying to have like, here's the story I tell for attraction. Here's the story I tell to build comfort. Here's the story I tell to make her think I was popular in high school. Here's the story I tell to make her think I'm selective with girls. Here's the thing I say to get her attention 10 seconds into the set. And there were good and bad things to that. There are absolutely good and bad things to that. But one of the interesting things about that, I'll tell you the good thing, I'll tell you the bad things also in a minute, but one of the really good things about that is when people had a structured canned line to go open with, like they were going to say, hey, excuse me, I need your opinion, is kissing cheating? Or hey, excuse me, I need your opinion, who lies more, guys or girls, right? When you knew you were going to say that every single set, one nice thing that happened was you didn't have so much approach anxiety because you weren't wondering and thinking and anticipating all these different things that could go wrong. Right? Like how many of you guys are scared of public speaking to some degree? Yeah? Some of you guys? Yeah, most people are. Most people are scared of public speaking to some degree. The first ever time I had to give a speech, first time I ever had to go talk to a big crowd, I was absolutely terrified. But the thing I was terrified of was very specific. The first time I ever had to talk to a big crowd, I was actually booked for a 3-hour speech, and I was going to be paid $1,000 to give it. So I wasn't going to say no, right? I'm like, I'll take it. I'll take the money. I want to do this. But I was absolutely terrified that I would sign up for this 3-hour speech, I'd give whatever I had on the top of my head, and then I'd be like, okay, guys, and then I'd look up and there'd be 2 hours left. I'd be like, oh shit, what do I do for the next 2 hours, right? And so what I did for that speech is I literally prepared what I thought would be like an 8-hour speech. I just prepared every single thing I thought I could have, and I had it in like a PowerPoint for myself, and I had it all scripted out. And it turned out that even with that, I ended up barely going 3 hours. But because I actually felt like I knew what I was talking about, because I felt like I had something to say, because I felt prepared, I felt tremendously less nervous, and I was able to actually give that speech. So there is definitely some power to having something prepared, right? If you are terrified that you will not know how to tease a girl, okay, you're not gonna be able to come up with a tease on the spot, it's very, very easy to take a tease that I've said before, or that you've seen in infield, or that you've said before, or whatever, and just have that in your back pocket. It's not very hard to do that, right? Talk to the girl, you say hi, you say hi, give her a compliment, she says hi back, you introduce yourselves, and then you're like, okay, now what, right? But if you know that you can be like, you know what, there's something about you that I love and something about you I'm not so sure about, right? If you have that in your back pocket, maybe it's not the greatest line in the world, it's okay. Now you know it's not going to be that weird, awkward silence, and you know you have some method to progress the interaction, right? So just having that line, very, very helpful. Or for example, if you knew you had like an interesting story, like let's say you're visiting New York, you have an interesting story about what happened when you were at the airport. Now you know that if the conversation goes completely silent, you can be like, you know what, the weirdest thing happened to me when I got into the city, and you can just tell this story. All right, so having a couple things as backup, if that helps you to get through your excuses, is absolutely not a bad thing. It's absolutely useful. And so that is actually a really important thing, I think, in terms of dealing with a lot of your nervousness, is if you actually do have a plan, if you do have some idea of what to do next, then it'll help, right? And in terms of having a plan of what to do next, if you have an overall structure of the game, you know that the things you want to achieve, that's where your plan comes from. It's kind of like, I don't know if you call this an anecdote or a joke, or it's not even a good one, but I use it as a metaphor a lot. I use it as like a way of thinking, as a mental model a lot, so I'll tell it to you for that reason, not because it's particularly hilarious. So imagine there's these two people and they're running a theater, and they're talking about whether they should make an announcement at the start of the theater, like a fire safety announcement before the movie. And the first person says, like, it's pointless, right? If there's a fire breaks out, everybody's gonna panic and forget the announcement anyway, and it's just gonna be chaos, right? And the second person says, yes, that's true, but at least they're gonna panic in the right direction. And that's kind of the idea. So if you have an idea of what your game plan is, if you have an idea of what you're trying to achieve, even if you don't quite know how to achieve it, even if you're not perfect, at least you're gonna panic in the right direction, right? So at least if you know that you need to keep the conversation going, you're at least gonna panic in the direction of saying something and trying to keep it going. If you know that the conversation is getting too platonic and it's destined for failure, you may not know the best man-to-woman line, but at least you're gonna try something that's man-to-woman, hopefully, right? And so you at least panic in the right direction. So the first step is having a general overall structure of what you wanna achieve. And there's a lot of overall structures that can kind of work. I'll give you overall structures from maybe the simplest to maybe the most complex, or some of the more complex ones that I know. Simplest structure I've ever seen work in game, a friend of mine in year 2005 taught me this. He said, here's how I do game. For the first 5 minutes, I just disagree with the girl, a lot, right? So if she says she's into rock, I'm into rap. If she says she likes to run, nah, I like to hike. If she says she likes the color pink, nah, blue's the jam, right? Whatever it is, you just disagree for the first 5 minutes. After that, you can start agreeing with her. That's literally all he did in game. You just have a conversation. You're like, nah, I don't know. It just doesn't feel right. No, I'm into this. No, I'm into this, right? Contradicting, and then afterwards, oh, you know what? That's actually a good point. I like that, right? And the girl feels like she earned him. She feels like he wasn't too obvious, he wasn't too needy, and then she kind of won him over. Simplest model for game ever. Not perfect by any means, lacks all kinds of important details, but it actually kind of works. But if you had no idea of game, and let's say you're like 12 years old, you have no idea of game, you don't even know how to talk to a girl, and you see this like cool high school kid, and he told you that. He told you, here's how you make girls like you. If you did that, it would actually kind of work. And then by doing that, you'd get some girls to like you, and because girls like you, and because you start going on dates, you're gonna get more experience with girls, and you'll get a more nuanced model. You'll learn more about it over time, right? So that's extremely simple model if you want it for game. I'll give you a similar, less simple model that's probably a lot more nuanced and a lot better. Say there are 3 phases of the interaction. No, from 2 phases to 3 phases now, I guess, right? So 3 phases of the interaction. The first one is, I don't like you yet. I'm not so sure about you. Pushing them away, giving them a hard time. Second phase is, wow, you're kind of starting to win me over, but you still have some work to do. Third phase is, I like you, however, or I like you, but. It's not like, look, I like you, but we're not going to sleep together tonight. I like you, but look, we live too far away, right? So there's still some tension, you're not completely bought in, but you are admitting you like them. So that's a different methodology, a different idea of the game. And the first one, you'd ask yourself, where am I at? Am I in the disagreeing phase or the agreeing phase? It's the simplest thing you have to do, and you have to be like, am I in the disagreeing phase? Okay, I know what to do, I'm going to disagree. Am I in the agreeing phase? Okay, I'm going to be nice and I'm going to agree. All right, this next one is a lot more complicated, but also a lot more effective. Right? What am I going to do? I'm going to give her a hard time and push her away. Okay, I'm going to let her win me over. Okay, I'm going to be won over, but not completely. That's a little bit more complex model, a little bit more nuanced. If you have that, you're going to game a little bit better, and it's going to give you a direction. And that's the idea. And to be fair, as the model improves, it is very important. It's very important to improve your model, but it's actually more important to have a model than it is to improve your model. The first model I ever had, I'll get to the third better model in a second, I'll get to that. But the first model I ever had of game was actually a bad model. I had a terrible, terrible model of attraction in game when I started out. But having a model at all and following it, even though I was following a wrong model, made me better at game. Okay? The model I had of game when I started out was from like a very old school pickup forum. And basically the idea was that like when you meet the girl, she either likes you or she doesn't. And if she likes you, don't mess it up. And if she doesn't like you, it's a lost cause anyway. And because of that, your job is to just get in and get a number as fast as possible before you make any mistakes or do anything wrong. And then once you get that number, ask her out on dates. It's a terrible, terrible model of game. But the good thing about the model is that it does have you proactively approaching. It has you proactively asking for numbers and proactively asking for girls on dates. Everything else about the model is just wrong. But it does lead to 3 correct actions. And in doing that, it got me getting numbers, it got me getting dates, and then in getting dates, I actually started to learn and figure out some things. And so even though it was massively wrong, just having a model, having a plan, even a shitty one, was better than what I had for the first 18 years of my life, which was no plan. So the point is, improving your plan, improving your model is very important, but the most important thing is having a model, even a basic one, having some plan, and then taking action on it. And then obviously you want to improve your plan as you go. All right, third and final plan, which you guys will all be familiar with. So I told you the two-step model and the 3-step model. Then I'll give you the 5-step model, which you guys are familiar with, which would be the open-close model. You guys know this, right? Open, premise, evaluate, narrative, close. Much more complicated model, a lot more to it. If you learn it and use it, much more nuanced than I'm going to disagree with for 5 minutes and then agree for 5 minutes, right, afterwards. Much better model, but the most important thing, again, is that you have a model and you take action.